Chapter 2. The Homecoming. Things started happening so quickly Fox could barely keep up. The bells in the square began to ring out again, and messenger birds filled the sky, heading to the mines and the outlying farms. Within minutes, the town square was filling with eager families, and Boric was stoking the common room fire. Then Fox was swept up in a flood of people taking refuge from the cold at the Five Sides. He scrambled out of the way and hid in the kitchen with Lai, who was pulling a hot pie out of the oven. "It's mad out there," said Fox. "As it should be," said Pick, swooping in quickly to scoop the pie out of Lai's hands and set it on the cooling rack. "A little madness now and then is good for you, Foxglove. Embrace it." "Go," said Lai excitedly. "Go see your father." "Yes," said Pick sagely. "Go to him. Brave the madness." Fox grinned and hurried back to the kitchen doorway, peering out into the common room. He could hear cheering and whistles outside. He put one foot out the door and then stopped, hesitating. In a moment, Lai was at his side. "Fox, what's wrong?" Fox turned to her. "I was right," he said quietly. "I knew they were coming." "Yes," said Lai just as quietly. "What does that mean?" he asked. Lai bit her lip, for a moment looking just as lost as he felt. "I don't know," she said finally. She squeezed his shoulder, and Fox took a deep breath. Then he plunged into the sea of bodies, threading his way through the crowd to the open door. Wagons and carts of all sizes were parked outside the tavern. As Fox watched, a handful of women detached themselves from the crowd and ran to the caravan, throwing themselves into their husbands' arms. Children followed behind them, calling out and waving, and Fox craned his neck, looking around for his own father. But before he could look very far, he was scooped up into the air and squeezed in a strong hug. "Dad," he said, throwing his arms around Father's neck and hugging just as tight. After a moment, Father peeled him away and set him back down on the ground. "Let me look at you," he said, and Fox stood up straight. Father folded his arms across his broad chest. "You've gotten taller," he said sternly. "Taller is no good. You lose your nimble footing and then you'll be useless to me." "Sorry, sir," said Fox, grinning. "I'll try and stop." A broad smile broke through Father's thick black beard, and he ruffled Fox's hair. "Well, it's the best I can expect, I suppose." Then, laughing, he put his hand on Fox's shoulder and said, "Let's go home." They fought their way through the crowd to where Cobb was standing patiently with the other animals. Ponies, mules, and a handful of the tall, thick-haired goats that were sometimes used to pull the wagons. As Father carefully led their pony away from the herd, Fox got a glimpse of Fire Merchant Terek's reunion with his wife. The two were wrapped in such a tight embrace that Fox was amazed either of them could breathe, and Terek's wife was crying and laughing all at once. "First winter alone for her," said Father quietly. "How'd she take it?" Fox raised his eyebrows, taking in the woman's sobs. "About like that, without all the kissing and laughing." They left the chaos of the square behind and hiked up to the house together, Cobb following placidly behind them. As they walked, Father told Fox stories of the trade caravan. "The colours," he said reminiscently. "The rich autumn reds and golds. You don't see that kind of colour here." He talked about the southern fashions and customs, and told Fox about the time he got to sell his furs to the ruling house of Marius. "What was their castle like?" asked Fox eagerly. "Big," said Father. "Very, very big. I can't imagine what they'd do with all that space. They have rooms so big they should never get warm. And, of course, their castle was nothing compared to Athilior. The seat of the High King," said Father, answering Fox's question even before he asked it. "Each of the central kingdoms have their own monarchs and lords, but they all have to answer to the High King." He hummed in a dreamy sort of way and stared up at a lone piece of blue sky shining through the clouds. "Someday, I'll take you to Athilior. It's the most beautiful city of silver and white. There are universities and libraries, the famous temple district, and the biggest marketplace this side of the Westerling Sea." Fox thought of that morning's breakfast of simple brown bread with a sigh, imagining what it must be like to have foreign spices and fruit. Every now and then Father brought back exotic treats, but they were gone all too soon. The Sylvestern lifestyle was simple, built around survival. The traders not only brought home money for their families, but many of the daily necessities that the people of Thicker Valley lacked. Father especially, his trade catering to the wealthy, kept the valley from disappearing. He bartered for needles and thread, cookware, knives, lanterns, buttons, fishing line. Tonight, when the 3-day homecoming festival began, Father would set up shop at the Five Sides and start trading with the valley folk. And Fox, in his constant efforts to prove to father that he was ready to be apprenticed, would be there for every moment of it. Mother was waiting for them on the front porch, leaning against the railing with her arms crossed. Mother never ran down to the Valley Square with the other wives when the bells started to ring. She and father had always preferred to have their reunions privately, it seemed, and so Fox, as he always did, turned left when they hit the front path and led Cobb to the stables, where he would remain until his parents called him in for dinner. Cobb went eagerly into his freshly cleaned stall and began tearing through his feeding bucket. Fox was completely ignored as he unloaded saddlebags and gear from the old pony's back. He hummed quietly as he worked, setting packages aside to be sorted later and picking bits of leaf and snow from Cobb's mane. He always took an extra long time brushing Cobb after the caravan's return, knowing that it was impractical to groom the animals thoroughly while on the road, as well as giving his parents as much time together as they might need. Slowly and deliberately, Fox worked over every inch of Cobb's thick grey fur, singing softly. Have you gone a westerling and seen the shining seas? They say a buried treasure waits behind the salty breeze. Have you ridden Merchant's Way and smelled the summer air? The autumn gold and winter cold are barely moments there. But if you go a westerling or past the southern gates, remember me wrapped in the hills where winter always waits. Cobb had finished eating and was standing calmly, swishing his tail. As Fox began working a comb through the pony's mane, he said quietly, I bet you never get tired of it, old boy. The lovely autumn weather and the long walks. He's the lucky one, isn't he? Said a voice from the stable door, and Fox jumped slightly. Father was standing there, leaning against the doorframe. He gets the easy job. I didn't hear you come in, said Fox. Trapper's tread, said Father, the god's gift to we that hunt. He joined Fox in Cobb's stall and knelt down, cradling one of the pony's hooves in his lap. New song? He asked. It started making the rounds about a month ago, Fox said. Winter nights got very long in Thicka Valley. To pass the time, many of the valley folk would write new songs during evenings in the Five Sides. Favourites began to circulate, making their way into the mines and out to the farmlands, filling the air all year long. I was there when Feradick finished off the last verse, and it sort of just stuck. It's beautiful, said Father. It'll be one of the ones that lasts. They worked in silence for a bit. Then, as Father set down Cobb's last hoof, he stood and stretched. Have you ever been up to the mines and heard them sing? He leaned against the wall, gazing out the window toward the northern mines. Early in the morning is best, just after the rest of the valley begins to wake up, and the men have already been at it for a couple of hours. They pick a song, and it starts off quiet, but then it swells and echoes. It fills the mountain, and it's like the earth itself is trying to speak to you. For a moment, he simply watched the evening snow begin to fall. Then he tossed his hoof-pick into the grooming bucket. For all the colours and riches the southern lands have to offer, they don't have anything that sounds like that. He smiled at Fox. Dinner will be ready by now, and then you and I have a homecoming to get to, don't we? Yes, sir, said Fox. They left Cobb dozing in his stall and made their way back up to the house. As they walked, Fox thought about the miner's song, about how much Father seemed to love it. With the whole Merchant's Highway at his feet and the stories he brought back every year, Father still preferred Thicka Valley, and Fox, who spent every winter honing his skills and trying to prove himself, couldn't wait to get out of it. As much as he himself loved his home and all of the people in it, he was restless. Fox spent his dinner watching Father across the fire pit. He watched as he and Mother exchanged quick kisses and held hands, and as Father took his time over every bite. He noticed for the first time how Father seemed to take in every stone as he looked around the kitchen. And then, all at once, he noticed how tired Father looked. This strong, laughing man was exhausted. He had hints of grey in his dark hair that had not been there last summer. As the sun outside finally dipped out of sight, the bells began to ring out in the valley square again. The homecoming festival was beginning, with the Five Sides at its heart. Within minutes, Father and Fox were on their way, laden with trade goods to set out at the tavern, and Fox decided to put his worries out of mind for a while. The homecoming was a chance to relax, to enjoy having the valley together after a long and lonely winter, and before the exhausting summer work began. Thick, wet snowflakes began to fall as they entered the valley square, and Fox breathed in the smells of the homecoming. Fresh hickory wood being added to the bonfire, roasting pigs, hot cider, Borix pies and fresh honey cakes. Smoke filtered through the chilly air, wrapping around the rooftops and making the moonlight hazy. "Stay for a while," said Father. "Have a good time. I'll set up the shop, and try to rescue me one of Borix blackberry pies later." As Father disappeared into the Five Sides, dancing broke out around the bonfire, sending long shadows darting across the shop fronts and the snow-powdered streets. Fox skittered off to the side to watch, enjoying the flashes of colour from the Thickens holiday finery. For a time he simply stood there, taking in the dance, and then a hand darted out of the crowd and clamped around his wrist, pulling him into the swirling mass. Kimmick Lillywhite, the grain miller's daughter, was smiling across the circle at him. Fox suddenly found himself skipping around the square in a frantic Sylvestern country dance, flecks of snow biting him on the cheeks and making his ears sting. That first dance was followed by 3 more, until Fox's lungs were on fire and he had to collapse on the leatherworker's shop windowsill. Kimmick sat beside him, laughing and brushing snow from her hair. "Thanks for joining me," she said breathlessly. "Don't have much of a choice," Fox said lightly as he loosened his scarf. Kimmick smiled at him. "Oh, come on, Fox. We both know you'd never get out there yourself." Fox shrugged. "I like to watch. What's wrong with that?" "It's just no fun is all," said Kimmick. She leaned her head back against the shop window. "It must be hard being a boy," she said contemplatively. "You have to start working so much younger than us girls." "Lai works just as hard as any of the boys." Kimmick rolled her eyes. "Yeah, but that's Lai, isn't it? She's different." Fox felt a sudden rage surge up inside him, and he bit down hard on the inside of his cheek. He didn't know why, but something about the way Kimmick said different made him want to hit something. Forcing himself to speak calmly, he said, "Well, what's so wrong with working hard?" "Nothing exactly," said Kimmick. "It's just a shame you boys can't have more fun sometimes." She sat up a little straighter and fluffed her skirt. "I can have fun until I get married." And then, to Fox's horror, she took one of his hands in hers and leaned closer. "Don't you want to have fun too? Come and dance with me again." Fox stood so abruptly that Kimmick lost her balance. "Sorry, gotta go help with the trading. Enjoy your dance." And he scurried away, quickly putting as many bodies between himself and Kimmick Lillywhite as possible. As he made his way to the Five Sides, he jammed his hands in his pockets, disgusted. Of course she was flirting with him. Every year there were a handful of youth who thought they would get special deals and trades if they befriended Fox. Young men and women who usually didn't pay him any mind were suddenly acting like close personal friends. Kimmick was a year older than him, and almost a head taller. She was always batting her eyes at the boys and spending her allowance on frivolous things. She would grow up to be one of those young women who would flirt with married men. Fox was sure of it. And the way she talked about Lai, as though working hard made her less of a girl. Fox was grateful for the chaos in the Five Sides, so he could put his mind to other things. Father's table was in the back corner by a window, and he was already surrounded by an eager crowd, all shouting out offers and vying for his attention. Before braving the storm of traders, Fox ducked into the kitchen and begged a fresh blackberry pie from Pick. Then he wove a path through the crowd and slouched onto the bench opposite Father, sliding the pie across the table to him. "Oh, thank spirit," Father said, and then he raised his voice to the clamouring city folk. All right. I know everyone wants to have their say, but give a man some room, please." The crowd backed away slightly, leaving Father to eat his pie in relative peace. "It's a madhouse this year," he said to Fox through a mouthful of blackberry. Fox surveyed the trade goods piled on the table and floor around it. "Looks like you made a good profit this trip," he said. "Not only with these," said Father, gesturing around with his fork. "I've arranged a special surprise that I think everyone will be excited for." Fox sat up on his knees and leaned in eagerly across the table. "No, sir," said Father quickly. "You'll wait with the rest of the valley and be surprised when they are." He finished his pie and shoved the empty plate across the wooden tabletop to Fox. "Take that back to the kitchen for me, and then I'll need you to find the lavender candlesticks in one of those packages on the floor. Faraday wants them for his wife, and he's made a solid offer." He caught Fox's eye and laughed. "Don't give me that stubborn little face. You look just like your mother. It was only a day behind us, so be on the lookout tomorrow. But that's all the hint you get. Now off with you." It was only a day behind, Father said. Fox and Lai sat in the Five Sides kitchen the next morning, trading guesses on what the special surprise might be. "It has to be something big," said Lai, "or else he would have just brought it with the caravan." "Not necessarily," said Fox. "Sometimes there are items he trades for that have to get sent later, like some of the more expensive fabrics." "Hey," called Pick from across the room, "if you're going to be in my kitchen breathing my air, you'll keep working for it." They turned back to the spring peas they were shelling and lowered their voices. "What if it's silk from Vathadel?" said Lai. "Or silver pallet shells from the Red Harbour," said Fox. "You're both wrong," said a voice from the doorway. Boric stood there, a knowing smirk on his face. "See for yourself. It's here." Lai grinned excitedly at Fox as they set their work aside and hurried out into the common room. The homecoming was still in full swing, with waresmen haggling prices all around them. Out in the square, children and adults alike were playing games, although at the moment many of them seemed to be watching something off in the distance. "Come on," said Lai, grabbing Fox's hand and pulling him outside. The morning chill was a shock after the warmth of the kitchen, but Fox tried to ignore it as he stood on tiptoes, trying to see what everyone was looking at. "What is it?" he asked no one in particular. The excitement in the square seemed to be swelling like a soap bubble, ready to pop at any moment. It seemed that people were not quite sure what was coming down the mountain road. And then a word began to be passed around the crowd. Fox heard it whispered from grain miller Lillywhite to miner Faraday. "Shavid." The Shavid. In Fox's lifetime they had never visited the humble Thicker Valley. But he knew who they were. Everybody knew who they were. The legendary Shavid groups travelled from place to place, never setting down roots. It was said that they answered only to the wind, and they danced for the kings. Shavid players and magicians were always welcome in the highest places, and yet they were coming here. Fox turned and caught Father's eye through the tavern window. Father winked at him, then turned back to his customers. Fox shook his head, amazed. Was there nothing Timmick Foxglove could not do? And how could he, Fox, ever live up to the man's legend? He could spend his whole life trying, that much he knew. But for now, the homecoming was about to get a whole lot more interesting. Fox had no idea how Father persuaded a Shavid company to come to the valley, or how long they were planning on staying. But he was going to take advantage of every second.